The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow across the conference room. Arya sat at the head of the table, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the sleek silver laptop in front of her. The screen displayed rows upon rows of numbers that had once represented her life's work, her dedication to perfection. Now, those same numbers felt like chains binding her to this moment. 3 security guards stood by the door, their presence heavy and oppressive. Across from her, Mr. Caldwell, the CEO, leaned back in his chair with an air of smug satisfaction. His tailored suit seemed to mock her own rumpled blazer, hastily thrown on after being summoned from her desk just minutes ago. Beside him, Ms. Langley, the HR director, shuffled through papers with deliberate slowness, prolonging the tension that hung thick in the air. "You've left us no choice, Arya," Caldwell finally said, his voice smooth but edged with steel. "This is about more than just one spreadsheet mistake." Arya's heart pounded against her ribs, each beat echoing in her ears. She wanted to scream, to tell them how she'd poured countless hours into perfecting those reports, how she'd caught errors others had missed for years. But instead, she forced herself to remain still, to maintain the facade of composure even as her world crumbled around her. "It wasn't a mistake," she managed to say, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "I found discrepancies." "Discrepancies?" Caldwell interrupted, his smile widening into something predatory. "Let's call it what it is, incompetence. And we simply can't afford that level of risk in our financial department." Ms. Langley slid a document across the table toward Arya. The termination letter. Her hands felt numb as she picked it up, scanning the official-looking text that sealed her fate. 8 years of loyalty, 8 years of late nights and weekends spent ensuring every decimal point was in its rightful place, reduced to this single piece of paper. As the reality sank in, memories flooded back. Her first day at Sterling and Company, the thrill of landing such a prestigious position fresh out of college, the camaraderie with colleagues who had since moved on or been promoted above her. All those years of climbing the corporate ladder only to be unceremoniously kicked off it. Caldwell stood, signaling the end of this farce of a meeting. "We'll need your access codes and any company property immediately," he said, his tone dismissive. "Security will escort you out." Arya rose slowly, her legs feeling like lead weights. As she gathered her belongings, anger began to simmer beneath her carefully maintained exterior. This wasn't just about some supposed error, it was about power, control, and cutting loose anyone who dared question the system. Her eyes landed on the spreadsheet still open on her laptop screen. Those numbers weren't mistakes, they were evidence of something much bigger, something that could bring down more than just her career. As the security guards closed in, Arya made a decision that would change everything, for Sterling and Company, for Caldwell, and most importantly for herself. Instead of handing over her laptop, she quickly entered a series of commands. The screen flickered, then went dark. When she finally surrendered the device, a small, satisfied smile played at the corners of her lips. They thought they were firing an accountant. What they didn't realize was that they'd just awakened something far more dangerous. The glass doors of Sterling and Company slid shut behind Arya with a finality that echoed through her soul. Each step away from the building felt heavier than the last, the weight of her termination pressing down on her shoulders. The crisp autumn air should have been refreshing, but instead, it carried a biting chill that matched her growing resentment. She clutched her box of personal belongings, a few photos, some pens, and a coffee mug that read "World's Okayest Accountant," as if holding on to these trivial items could somehow anchor her to the life she'd built. As she walked aimlessly through the city streets, the events of the past hour replayed in her mind like a broken record. Caldwell's condescending smirk, Langley's practiced indifference, and worst of all, the pitying looks from colleagues who had pretended to be her friends. None of them had spoken up, not even when they knew she was right about the discrepancies. Not even when they'd benefited from her meticulous work over the years. The betrayal cut deeper than any severance package ever could. Her phone buzzed incessantly in her pocket, notifications from work-related apps demanding attention she no longer owed. With each vibration, her anger grew. Who did they think they were, discarding her like yesterday's news? After 8 years of pouring her soul into that company, catching errors that would have cost them millions, staying late to fix other people's mistakes, this was how they repaid her loyalty? Arya found herself drawn to a nearby park bench, where she sat staring at the passing crowd without really seeing them. Memories flooded back, the sleepless nights spent reconciling accounts, The pride she'd felt when her department consistently received top ratings, the way she'd sacrificed vacations and social events to meet deadlines. And now, all of that amounted to nothing more than a cardboard box of trinkets and a generic termination email waiting for her in her inbox. But beneath the hurt and anger lay something else, something cold and calculating. While they were busy escorting her out of the building, while Coldwell was delivering his rehearsed speech about company interests, Arya had noticed something crucial. Their fear. The way Langley kept glancing at her laptop, the subtle shift in Coldwell's demeanor when she mentioned the discrepancies. They weren't just firing her, they were silencing her. And that realization transformed her pain into something far more dangerous: resolve. She pulled out her personal phone and opened the encrypted chat app she'd installed months ago, after first discovering the irregularities in the company's financials. The messages she'd exchanged with an anonymous whistleblower within the firm suddenly took on new meaning. Every ignored warning, every covered-up discrepancy, every questionable transaction, they were all pieces of a puzzle she'd been too afraid to fully assemble while still employed there. The wind picked up, sending leaves swirling around her feet. Arya watched them dance and realized she could do the same. She could either let this moment break her completely, or she could use it to break free from the constraints that had held her back. From the moment she'd started at Sterling and Company, she'd played by their rules, followed their procedures, respected their hierarchy. And look where that had gotten her. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed a response to the latest message from her anonymous contact. "They made a mistake today," she wrote. "A big one." Then she attached the file she'd secretly backed up weeks ago, the one containing all the evidence she'd meticulously gathered, the one currently locked behind multiple layers of encryption on her personal cloud storage. The reply came almost instantly: "What do you need?" Arya stared at the screen, her mind racing. For 8 years, she'd been content to operate within the system, believing that hard work and integrity would be enough. Now, sitting on this park bench with nothing but a box of office memorabilia and a burning sense of injustice, she understood that sometimes you had to become the storm to clear the air. Her lips curved into a determined smile as she began typing her response. Sterling and Company's headquarters loomed large against the gray sky, its glass facade reflecting the chaos brewing inside. In the executive suite, Mr. Coldwell paced furiously, while Ms. Langley tapped anxiously on her keyboard. The morning's triumph had quickly soured as they discovered the extent of Arya's final act of defiance. What had seemed like a routine termination was rapidly escalating into a full-blown crisis. "The frozen accounts total nearly $30 million, Langley reported, her voice tight with panic. "And that's just what we've identified so far. The encryption on her backup files, it's military grade. Our IT team says they've never seen anything like it." Coldwell slammed his fist against the conference table, causing several executives to jump. "How could this happen? We're talking about a mid-level accountant, not some cybersecurity expert." "That's where you're wrong," interjected Marcus Chun, the company's chief technology officer. His usual calm demeanor was notably absent. "From what our preliminary analysis shows, she's been planning this for months. The encryption protocols, the hidden backups, the way she embedded triggers in our systems, it's brilliant. Almost artistic in its execution." Around the table, faces paled as the implications sank in. The board members who had previously dismissed Arya as just another number cruncher now understood the gravity of their miscalculation. They had fired someone who understood their systems better than they did themselves. "She must have had help," Coldwell insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "No one person could orchestrate something like this alone." Chin shook his head. "Actually, sir, that's exactly what makes this so impressive. Everything points to a single operator. She used her legitimate access to set up dummy accounts, created mirrored databases that looked inactive, and established fail-safes that triggered automatically when her credentials were revoked. It's textbook insider threat methodology, executed with surgical precision." In the finance department, chaos reigned supreme. Teams scrambled to assess the damage while fielding increasingly frantic calls from clients whose transactions had mysteriously stalled. The discrepancies Arya had flagged, once dismissed as minor accounting errors, now appeared as glaring red flags pointing to systematic issues throughout the company's financial operations. "What's worse," Chin continued, pulling up a complex network diagram on the conference room screen, "is how deeply she's embedded herself in our infrastructure. These nodes here represent critical systems she's compromised. Accounting, payroll, client databases, she's got us by the throat." The display showed a web of interconnected systems, many marked with alarming red indicators. Caldwell's face turned ashen as he realized the true scope of the situation. "Can we contain this?" "We're trying," Langley admitted, "but every time we think we've isolated one compromised system, two more pop up. It's like she anticipated every move we'd make." Downstairs, employees whispered in hushed tones about the mysterious former accountant who had apparently taken the entire company hostage. Some expressed admiration for her technical prowess, while others feared for their jobs as the financial freeze threatened to ripple through every department. The company's stock price had already begun to dip as rumors spread through Wall Street channels. In the legal department, teams worked feverishly to draft emergency measures while preparing for potential regulatory scrutiny. The discrepancies Arya had uncovered, now impossible to ignore, suggested patterns of financial mismanagement that could attract unwanted attention from government agencies. "This isn't just about the money," observed Victoria Hall, the company's general counsel. "Every compromised system represents a vulnerability. If word gets out about the extent of this breach, it could destroy our reputation. Clients will flee, investors will pull out, and regulators will descend on us like vultures." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. The very competence they had punished Arya for was now threatening to dismantle the empire they had sought to protect. Her intimate knowledge of their systems, honed through years of dedicated service, had become their greatest liability. As the day wore on, the situation grew increasingly dire. International transactions remained frozen, major clients demanded answers, and internal communications became fragmented as various departments struggled to coordinate their response. Through it all, Arya's name remained conspicuously absent from official statements, as if mentioning her might somehow legitimize her actions. "She knew exactly what she was doing," Chun concluded during an emergency board meeting. "This isn't random sabotage, it's a calculated strike against specific vulnerabilities. The timing, the execution, the scale. It's all too precise to be anything else." The assembled executives exchanged worried glances. They had fired an employee. Now they faced an adversary who understood their weaknesses better than they did themselves. The woman they had dismissed as just another cog in the machine had revealed herself to be the architect of their downfall, and she hadn't even begun to play her hand. Back at her modest apartment, Arya sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by laptops, external drives, and stacks of meticulously organized documents. The space had transformed from a simple living area into a command center, every surface covered with notes, flowcharts, and highlighted printouts. Her eyes darted between multiple screens, each displaying different aspects of Sterling and Company's crumbling infrastructure. The adrenaline surge from earlier had settled into a focused determination, her movements precise and methodical as she navigated through layers of encrypted data. On one monitor, a live feed showed the company's internal communication channels, emails flying back and forth in panic tones, desperate attempts to contain the crisis she had unleashed. Another displayed real-time financial data, showing how her carefully placed digital traps were rippling through their systems like shockwaves. Each notification of a frozen account, each failed transaction, brought her closer to her goal. Yet beneath the cold efficiency of her actions lay a seething cauldron of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her rational mind. Her fingers paused over the keyboard as memories assaulted her consciousness. The casual dismissals during budget meetings when she'd raised concerns about suspicious transactions. The condescending smiles from colleagues who had benefited from her silence. The hollow promises of promotion and recognition that had never materialized. These weren't just business grievances, they were personal wounds that had festered for years, feeding the fire of her revenge. A soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. She glanced at the peephole to see her neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, holding a casserole dish. The elderly woman had always been kind, checking in regularly since Arya had moved in 3 years ago. Normally, she would have welcomed the distraction, maybe even shared a cup of tea. But not tonight. Not when she was so close to completing her master plan. "I'm fine, Mrs. Thompson," she called through the door, forcing warmth into her voice. "Just having a busy work night." The disappointment in the older woman's sigh was palpable. "Well, dear, if you need anything." The sound of retreating footsteps echoed in the hallway, leaving Arya alone with her turmoil once more. Her gaze fell on the photograph taped to her wall, a group shot from last year's company retreat. She remembered how proud she had felt standing among her colleagues, believing she belonged, believing she mattered. Now she saw only masks, each smile hiding secrets, each handshake sealing deals that shouldn't have existed. The revelation of their collective complicity burned brighter than her anger at Caldwell's betrayal. Her phone vibrated again, this time with a message from her anonymous contact within the company. The words sent a shiver down her spine. They're considering legal action. Threatening criminal charges. Aria's heart raced as she processed the implications. They wouldn't hesitate to paint her as a criminal, to twist her righteous anger into something monstrous. Could she handle the consequences of her actions? Was she prepared to sacrifice everything, her freedom, her reputation, her future? The emotional weight pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She reached for the small notebook she kept tucked under her desk, flipping through pages filled with calculations and code snippets until she found what she was looking for. Scrawled in the margins were notes from her therapy sessions, reminders to stay grounded, to separate professional challenges from personal worth. Her counselor's words echoed in her mind, "You are not defined by your job title." Yet here she was, letting Sterling and Company define her actions, her choices, her very existence. The realization struck her like a physical blow. She had wanted justice, yes, but had she crossed the line into becoming the very thing she despised? The company's willingness to sacrifice her had ignited this firestorm, but was she now perpetuating the same cycle of destruction? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, poised to execute the next phase of her plan. On one screen, she watched as another major client initiated panic protocols due to delayed transactions. On another, she monitored the mounting pressure on Caldwell's leadership position. She had the power to bring it all crashing down with a single command. But as she stared at her reflection in the darkened window, she wondered if victory would taste as sweet as she had imagined. The clock ticked past midnight, each second amplifying the battle raging within her. Outside, the city slept, oblivious to the digital war being waged in her small apartment. Inside, Aria wrestled with questions that couldn't be answered by spreadsheets or algorithms. The woman who had been fired over a spreadsheet now held an entire corporation's fate in her hands, but at what cost to her own soul? As dawn approached, Aria's apartment transformed into a symphony of blinking lights and whirring fans. Her careful preparations had evolved into a sophisticated operation that rivaled the company's own IT infrastructure. Multiple virtual private networks routed her connections through servers scattered across the globe, creating a digital labyrinth that even Sterling and Company's best cybersecurity experts struggled to penetrate. Yet with each layer of complexity she added to her defenses, she felt the walls closing in tighter around her conscience. The media had caught wind of the unfolding drama, and breaking news alerts began flooding her monitors. Financial analysts speculated about potential market impacts, while industry insiders whispered about systemic corruption within Sterling and Company. The story had grown beyond a simple case of corporate retaliation, morphing into a David versus Goliath narrative that captured public imagination. Hashtags like #AccountantRevenge and #SpreadsheetJustice trended on social media, with thousands sharing memes and theories about the mysterious former employee who had taken down a corporate giant. But fame was the last thing Aria wanted. She watched as strangers crafted elaborate theories about her motives and methods, some painting her as a hero while others condemned her as a criminal. The disconnect between public perception and her private reality created a strange dissonance. To the outside world, she was either a vigilante fighting corporate greed or a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. Neither characterization captured the complexity of her situation or the depth of her internal conflict. Her encrypted chat with the anonymous whistleblower within Sterling and Company continued to provide crucial insights. The person, who she suspected was a senior auditor named Daniel, kept her informed about the company's increasingly desperate attempts to contain the crisis. Their conversations had shifted from purely professional exchanges to something deeper, perhaps friendship, perhaps something more. He understood the technical aspects of what she was doing, but more importantly, he grasped the emotional toll it was taking on her. "You don't have to do this alone," Daniel had written earlier. "Whatever happens, I'll stand by you." His words haunted her as she worked through the night. The support was tempting, especially now that isolation weighed heavily on her shoulders. But accepting help meant exposing someone else to the risks she had willingly taken on herself. Every time her finger hovered over the send button to reveal more about her location or plans, she pulled back. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, diving deeper into the compromised systems. The technical challenge proved both exhilarating and exhausting. She had designed the attack like a multi-layered puzzle, each solution revealing new complications. Firewalls adapted to countermeasures, automated scripts responded to manual overrides, and predictive algorithms anticipated human interventions. Watching the company's experts struggle to keep up with her innovations filled her with a perverse sense of satisfaction, yet also deepened her awareness of how far she had strayed from her original intentions. Financial data streamed across her screens, painting a picture of Sterling and Company's unraveling empire. Major clients began withdrawing their business, citing instability and lack of transparency. Share prices plummeted as investors fled, and regulatory bodies launched formal investigations based on the discrepancies she had exposed. The house of cards she had built her career upon was collapsing exactly as she had planned, but the scale of destruction overwhelmed her expectations. A particular dataset caught her attention: internal communications between Caldwell and several high-profile clients. The messages revealed not just financial improprieties, but a web of influence peddling and political maneuvering that extended far beyond the company's official operations. As she dug deeper, the scope of corruption expanded beyond anything she had anticipated. What had started as a personal vendetta had uncovered a conspiracy that reached into government offices and international markets. Her phone buzzed with another message from Daniel: "They're calling emergency board meetings every hour. Caldwell's losing control. People are scared." Scared. The word resonated with her own fears. Fear of getting caught, fear of going too far, fear of becoming the monster they accused her of being. The encrypted chat window blinked again. "Remember why you started this?" Why had she started this? The question gnawed at her as she watched the sun rise over the city skyline. Had it been about proving her worth? Exposing the truth? Seeking justice? Or had it simply been about hurting those who had hurt her? The lines between these motivations blurred with each passing hour, each new revelation about the company's wrongdoing complicating her moral compass. Outside her window, the world woke up to another day of headlines about corporate scandal and digital warfare. Inside, Arya faced a battlefield of her own making, where every victory felt like defeat and every step forward led deeper into territory she wasn't sure she could navigate. The spreadsheet that had cost her a job now controlled millions in frozen assets, but the price of her revenge weighed heavier with each passing moment. The stakes escalated dramatically as Arya received an unexpected visitor. Two plainclothes detectives stood at her door, their badges gleaming in the afternoon light. Behind them loomed figures in dark suits, federal agents, their presence unmistakable. Her heart raced as she realized the game had changed. Sterling and Company wasn't just fighting back, they were playing for keeps, willing to involve law enforcement to protect their secrets. Inside her apartment, chaos erupted. Agents swarmed through her carefully arranged command center, seizing equipment and documenting her elaborate setup. Yet as they worked, Arya maintained her composure, watching silently as they discovered layer after layer of her digital fortress. The lead investigator, Agent Morrison, seemed particularly interested in her encrypted files, his eyes narrowing as he recognized the sophistication of her security measures. "This isn't just about corporate espionage," Morrison stated, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too many cases like this. "Your actions have triggered investigations at the highest levels. SEC, DOJ, even international authorities are involved now." Arya's mind raced as she processed the implications. This had gone far beyond a personal vendetta or a corporate power struggle. The discrepancies she had uncovered touched sensitive areas of national security and international finance. The encrypted chat with Daniel flashed on one of the seized laptops, evidence of insider assistance that could implicate others in her scheme. Meanwhile, Sterling and Company launched a PR offensive that painted her as a rogue element threatening financial stability. Press conferences featured Caldwell himself, his polished speeches carefully crafted to portray the company as a victim of malicious intent rather than a perpetrator of systemic fraud. Yet each statement contained subtle admissions, phrases like complex financial structures and industry-standard practices that savvy journalists interpreted as coded confessions. Her anonymous contact within the company sent urgent messages: "They're offering immunity to anyone who helps bring you down. Several people in IT are cracking under pressure." The betrayals stung, but they also confirmed the depth of corruption she had suspected. The company would sacrifice anyone to protect its interests, a fact that strengthened her resolve even as it intensified her isolation. Legal proceedings began moving with alarming speed. Warrants multiplied, asset freezes expanded, and court orders piled up. Her bank accounts were frozen, her movements restricted, and her every communication monitored. Yet through it all, she maintained control of the crucial systems she had compromised. Each attempt to bypass her security measures only triggered additional safeguards, buying her precious time. The media frenzy reached fever pitch as details emerged about the scale of financial irregularities at Sterling and Company. Investigative journalists, following leads she had strategically leaked, uncovered connections to political campaigns, offshore accounts, and questionable government contracts. Public outrage grew as citizens realized how deeply corporate corruption had penetrated their institutions. Through encrypted channels, Daniel provided crucial support, helping her navigate the legal minefield while maintaining operational security. Their collaboration evolved into something profound, born of shared purpose and mutual trust. Together, they refined their strategy, adapting to new challenges while gathering additional evidence that would prove decisive in the coming confrontation. As days turned into weeks, Arya found herself at the center of a storm that dwarfed her initial ambitions. What had started as personal revenge had transformed into something far greater, a catalyst for exposing systemic corruption that reached into the highest echelons of power. Yet with each new revelation came increased danger, more aggressive tactics from both Sterling and Company and government agencies, and mounting pressure to reveal her hand. Agent Morrison's visits became more frequent, his approach shifting from adversarial to almost sympathetic. "You're playing a dangerous game," he warned during one tense encounter. "People are getting hurt, innocent people caught in the crossfire of your crusade." His words struck home, forcing her to confront the collateral damage of her actions. Employees losing their jobs, families facing financial ruin, businesses disrupted by frozen assets, these were real consequences of her digital warfare. The ethical dilemma weighed heavily on her conscience, threatening to undermine her resolve at the critical moment when she needed strength most. Yet even as doubt crept in, new information surfaced that hardened her determination. Documents revealed how Sterling and Company had actively suppressed previous attempts to expose their practices, ruining careers and silencing whistleblowers. The pattern of intimidation and cover-ups stretched back years, implicating not just current executives but an entire network of complicit individuals and organizations. Her encrypted communications with Daniel reflected their growing understanding of the true scope of their mission. "This isn't just about Sterling anymore," he wrote. "It's about changing the system that allows this to happen. Are you ready for what comes next?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, mirroring her own internal debate. The woman who had once been fired over a spreadsheet now commanded an arsenal of digital weapons capable of dismantling an entire corporate empire. Each decision she made rippled through the financial world, affecting thousands of lives and potentially reshaping industry practices. The crisis had escalated beyond anything she could have imagined, forcing her to choose between vengeance and justice, between personal satisfaction and systemic change. In her small apartment, surrounded by agents and investigators, Arya prepared for the next phase of her campaign. The tools of her trade, encrypted drives, sophisticated algorithms, and meticulously documented evidence, remained her only allies in this high-stakes game. Outside, the city buzzed with speculation about her identity and motives, while inside powerful forces aligned against her. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just her fate, but the future of corporate accountability itself. As the final pieces fell into place, Arya executed her ultimate move. She released the encrypted files, not to the chaos of public exposure, but directly to investigative authorities, ensuring they could dismantle Sterling and Company's corruption systematically. Coldwell and his inner circle were arrested, their crimes laid bare. Facing charges herself, Arya struck a deal: immunity for her role in exchange for testifying against the company's leadership and helping reform financial oversight systems. With Daniel by her side, she walked out of the courthouse free, vindicated not just as an accountant but as someone who had forced accountability where none existed. Months later, sitting in a quiet cafe far from corporate towers, Arya opened her laptop. On the screen was an acceptance letter for a prestigious fellowship aimed at reshaping ethical standards in finance. She smiled softly, knowing she'd turned betrayal into purpose. The spreadsheet that once cost her everything now symbolized change, and justice served on her terms.